Okay, boys and girls, I'm back. Sorry I had to start another video since I had to flip the screen around. Okay, so boys and girls, we're on page 174. And of course, this is Two Bad Ants. And I know that you've already read the story and you reviewed all the vocabulary. I am going to say the vocabulary out loud for those of you that would like to follow along with me. It will just help you to hear it as I say it. Scout, narrow, surrounded, underground, puzzling, glassy, violently, liquid, soggy, and unaware. And of course, you all had the first page or a couple of pages in your packet were just on completing the vocabulary. So I hope that you read the directions carefully. They say to, the directions say to find the highlighted words in Two Bad Ants and in the glossary to determine the meanings as used in the story. So boys and girls, I hope that that you not only use the glossary to write the definitions, but that you actually went back in the story or before the story on page 170 and 171. They give you vocabulary cards, and on these cards, each word in the story is used in a sentence. So you can use your context clues to actually help you figure out the meanings of these words. And when we're reading a story, most of the words in the story, of course, are not easily accessible for us to look up and find the definition of. And so when we're reading stories and we come across words that we don't know, we have to use our context clues. Now remember, context clues are the clues that the author gives us in the text to figure out the meaning. So for example, boys and girls, looking at number 1, this scout explores ahead of the others to lead the way. There are a lot of clues here in the text that help you figure out what scout means. It says the scout explores, so we know that a scout does exploring. And then it says ahead of the others to lead the way. So we know that a scout must be somebody or something that goes ahead of the others to figure out what lies ahead. Maybe they're doing some exploration, like hiking. If you go ahead of the others, then you search and you look around in the woods and everything you would look around and see everything that's around you to figure out where you're at and then go back and report to the others. And of course, if you've read Two Bad Ants, you know that the scout ants are the ants that go ahead and find food, and then they come back to their colony to the other ants and report what they found and lead them back to where the food is. Just for example, another one here is number 2, narrow. In narrow spaces, explorers must walk in a single line to get through. Well, using the picture, I can tell that narrow means it's not very wide. Okay, so you can tell that this tunnel or this cave, wherever these men are exploring, the walls of the cave are not very wide. So you can see that by looking at the illustration. And so they have to actually walk in a line to get through it. That means there's not enough room for them to walk side by side. So boys and girls, please, as you're reading or going through some of these stories, at the beginning of the story, there is always the vocabulary and context pages. Please make sure that you read these carefully and use your context clues before you start reading the story, because all of these yellow bold print words will be found in the story. And then boys and girls, you have another page here called a background page before the stories. And in this case, it tells you a little bit about ants. So you get some background knowledge and learn a little bit about ants before you start actually reading the story. And I'm sure you all saw this, the little graphic organizer here, which is actually similar to the graphic organizer that you have in your packet. Okay. Yes, Miss Clyde went ahead and filled hers out too. I'm doing my homework just like you guys are. We don't always fill out a lot of charts like this in class, but we discuss all of these components in our stories. So, for example, the characters, of course, are the main characters, the people in the story. The setting is where a story takes place. The problem is the conflict. We talk about that all the time. So I know that you guys know, of course, what the problem is. And the major events, boys and girls, these would be at least 3 or 4 of the main things that happen in the story. And of course, when we're looking at the main things that happen in a story, we think about the sequence, the order in which these things happen. So don't skip around when you're writing the event. Start at the beginning of the story and follow through all the way to the end. And then, of course, the solution or resolution is how the problem is solved. And usually the problem is solved at the end of the story. Okay, so getting back to Two Bad Ants. Oh, and real quick, as I was quizzing some of you guys, and see, even Miss Clyde is busy quizzing you even when you're at home. I'm still spying on your learning. If you guys look carefully right here in the beginning, it tells you the genre or the type of story that Two Bad Ants is. And actually, guys, Two Bad Ants, even though it's in this reading book, it is actually a book, a separate book that you could check out of the library. But the entire book has been included in this reading book along with other stories. So moving along, this genre, of course, is fantasy. A fantasy is a story that could not happen in real life. Boys and girls, we have read lots of different types of stories this year. We've read biographies, which are fiction. They're a type of genre. We have talked about Roald Dahl books, which are fantasies, or stories about things that could not really happen, like witches and goblins and creatures and animals talking. All of those things are fantasy stories because they could not happen in real life. Boys and girls, I'm almost approaching 8 minutes, and I believe that's the time limit for a video to upload to Dojo. So Miss Clyde's going to stop here, and then if you want to take a little break and then join me for the next part of the video, then you can. I'll start that up in just a second.